All right. Good evening. Saw it right there. The first and I guess only vice presidential debate just ended between Vice President Mike Pence and Senator Kamala, and man, this was interesting. Let me jump right into this. And well, matter of fact, let me introduce our panel tonight. We have from Converge Media, Julia Jessie, a 100% verifiable political junkie, and also from the South Seattle Emerald, we've got Mike Davis, one of the most opinionated brothers that I know. So I think that we'll have a pretty lively discussion here tonight. Man, who wants to start this off with first impressions from the debate?
Well, maybe ladies first, right?
There you go.
My first impression is this. Susan Page says, I needed you to boss up a little bit more. I'm actually very disappointed in her moderation. It seems like the only time that she wanted to kind of interject was when Senator Harris had something to say. She really allowed Vice President Pence to just ramble on and on and on. And then he just never answered the question. It just seemed like the very end, he wanted to answer the eighth grade question and just say, all Americans get along at the end of the day. So very, very, very interesting debate. I think we did cover some topics, but not enough topics that are important to the American people, I think, at this time. We spent a lot of time on fracking. I mean, I know that that is just a buzzword right now that everyone's Googling, including myself. I'm like, what is fracking? I think the average American person does not have a concern of fracking. So that was something interesting to learn and interesting to talk about. But yeah, lots to talk about, but we did have some really cool Black girl magic moments with Senator Harris, so I'm really excited to kind of dive into those.
All right, so Mike, we'll hop over to you real quick, man. What were some of your first big picture takeaways?
I think one big takeaway that we got to see was just seeing Kamala Harris be on TV in that space. I was actually watching with my 7-year-old daughter, and just her seeing the image of Senator Harris up there, it really just meant so much to her. So just on the topic of Black girl magic, that was definitely popping in our house, and I love being able to watch my daughter have that moment. On the debate itself, I would say that I agree that the moderation, Pence was allowed to ramble in some areas. I think he intentionally didn't answer most of the questions that were asked directly of him. But I did appreciate the way that Senator Harris seemed to handle himself much better than Joe Biden did when, Trump was just kind of running over him and he was getting really, really frustrated. But this was, if you go back to when Senator Harris had to debate Joe Biden, she jumped all over Joe Biden too. So she's very, very good in these situations.
Oh yeah, she definitely hit you with the excuse me, can I finish my statement? I'm reclaiming my time. I think she really held back a little bit. I've seen Senator Harris on other platforms, and she's been a little bit more outspoken. But I think probably her debate team was telling her, don't be that aggressive Black woman. But I think for all the little Black girls watching, and to, the little Black girl that's still inside the adults, I really wanted her to kind of just give that push that I know that she had in her.
Well, I feel like she probably couldn't, just because of how much of a disaster the first debate was.
Most definitely.
They were telling her to really dial it back, and even when there were some spots where there were times where you could hear Pence just being disingenuous, you could see all in her face that she wanted to jump in there, but she showed that restraint, and I think that was what was good the past debate.
All right, so I got to jump in here on this, though. I might be one of the few Black geologists that you know. I got a degree in geology from Elizabeth City State University, so I'm very well with fracking is. And actually, one of my jobs when I was in college, I worked for, I guess you call it Halliburton now, Baker Hughes, doing oil exploration in the Gulf. So fracking does make up a big part of economy in states, especially to depend upon oil exploration. That's the fractional extraction of basically oil and gas, molecular level, things like that. But, it also has a downside on the environment. So in certain states, like especially like North Dakota and places like that, in areas down south where you have fractional petroleum deposits, then fracking is a big deal because it's driving an economy there. So for other people, us, it's here, it's tech, but other people in America, fracking is a big deal.
Well, it's the oil industry, right? And we're talking about, I think the conversation that they had on climate change and, they brought up, just the idea of the Green Deal. What do you support and what do you not support? Climate change is important. And I think Mike Pence really showed us where the Trump administration stands on that. We don't give a damn about jobs if the world is being set on fire, right? I mean, you can't have jobs, you can't have a great economy if the earth is on fire. And so we really have to take some aggressive steps to stop climate change. And I think this administration has shown that they really don't care about climate change. They took it off their website.
Right.
That's very true. And I think that listening to Mike Pence talk, one thing that he does do rather well is take very complex issues and then try to make them simplistic. When he talks about fracking, he tries to make it sound as simple as you get rid of fracking and you get rid of jobs, when really there's no way that we can do it responsibly. And I appreciate what you said, Omari, and I would also add that in areas where fracking happens, there's also a lot of health effects that come from the process of fracking. So if you're out here doing that and you're making people sick, and now you want to repeal the CARES Act and make it so that people can't have access to health care, don't try to make this situation sound as simplistic as that, because you guys are compounding the problems of the American people. And by and large, when Mike Pence talks, all you really hear is dollar signs. That's all the Trump administration really cares about is dollar signs, and not dollars for me and dollars for you. It's dollars that keep rich people rich, because that's who's truly going to benefit from it. If you ask the average person, if you get rid of fracking and you replace it with renewable energy, there's jobs that will also come with that. So give us the jobs, give us the health care. Don't just keep making rich people more rich.
All right, well, we'll circle back around to that. It's an interesting topic, Garrett, but I want to go into one of the very first big thing of the night, and that was the topic around COVID and how COVID is impacting our country. Man, and that's also when Kamala Harris just went all the way in, like, for Trump, she just went hard.
As she should have. I mean, we're talking about, I think she did go hard, but I think she really kind of saved some of the bigger blows to later on. I wish she had brought up in the beginning that it is a fact that the Trump administration dismantled the U.S. pandemic response team in 2018. That's a fact. So you were gifted this great response team when you came in after the Obama administration. Who predicted? This has been predicted that it was going to happen. You dismantled this team of scientists and epidemiologists, and all of a sudden we have this huge explosion here in our nation, and really, and all over the world. So the response to COVID-19 really just is disappointing. We have a president who did not tell the American people, for whatever reason. Vice President Pence says because the president didn't want to scare the American people, but we are scared. And I think Senator Harris raised a great point. Sometimes you have to let people know what's going on, even if it is going to scare them, right? And so we would have been able to kind of take a different stance had we known what we know. And it's just incredible. I mean, if you restructure this pandemic response team, as they would like to call it, where would we be if that never happened?
Right. And your thoughts, Mike, on on Pence's response around COVID?
What jumped out to me on Pence's response to COVID was how he really tried to jump on the fact that President Trump hopped out and banned travel to China. And he wanted all the kudos for that. And he even pointed out the fact that Joe Biden was against it. But that happened in February. Trump was informed that COVID was an airborne virus in January. So when Biden was against that, Did Joe Biden even know that it was airborne? Because the Trump administration held that information in and they didn't release it to the public. So again, it's not as simple as Trump just making that decision. It's the right decision. No, you held on to that information. You didn't tell the American people. You also dismantled the pandemic response team. And there were also reports of money that was supposed to be for medical supplies and things like that the Trump administration went and spent on military uniforms and a bunch of weird things. So they mishandled this, and Kamala handled that very, very well. I'm sure she could have talked for days on how bad the Trump administration has mishandled this pandemic.
Right. Well, what I got as well from Pence was that like the approach of the Trump administration is like they're putting a lot of emphasis on a vaccine. You know, that's where they're putting a lot of their eggs in the basket. It's like vaccine, and the things that might be happening in the interim. They're like, man, well, you know, this is bad. It's happening, but all their efforts are on the vaccine. Where I think there's another approach of like, man, we need to deal with what's going on right now with people while dealing with the vaccine. And, you know, because when Pence was talking, he named off all these different things. We're doing this vaccine, we're pushing this, trying to get a cure and everything else. Wasn't really so much about, you know, what's impacting people who are being affected by COVID right now.
I mean, that just brings up the fact that, and I think Kamala answered that and she addressed that. You know, Susan asked her, you know, if a vaccine were going to come out, would you be confident and would you take that vaccine? And she unequivocally said no, not if Donald Trump is the one who's saying it's okay to take. Now, if the doctors, if the physicians and the patients are saying that it's good, I will. And I think that just goes to show the level of confidence that we have in our own government. And Vice President Pence kind of pivoted and said, you know, you can't kind of pull that trust out of government. But Vice President Pence, that's not Senator Harris pulling, you know, making people feel like they can't have any trust in government. That's the Trump administration that is making people feel that way. And so I think that Senator Harris really spoke the sentiments of a lot of the American people, including myself.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that a little bit, you know, all Pence really talked about was rolling back regulations. Like that's been a staple of the Trump administration, and like less government and less regulation of this and less safety is honestly what it boils down to. So why would we trust the virus that came from the Trump administration, especially when we see that this virus, they're aiming for the fastest turnaround in history. Do we really trust the Trump administration to do that? And I think Senator Harris hit it right on the money. If the health officials tell us that it's safe, then yes, we trust that it's safe. But Donald Trump doesn't earn the benefit of the doubt. He doesn't get to tell us to just blindly trust anything that he says at this point, especially with his constant stance on not believing in science and scientists.
Right. Julia, what are some of the other points in the debate that popped out to you? I know you're a copious note taker. What's on your notepad over there?
My notes. I think the biggest thing, and I don't know if it's too early to go into this, but when the question was brought up about the response to the Breonna Taylor incident, and Vice President Pence, in true conservative white man fashion, pivoted the conversation to instead of talking about race relations and systemic racism, he pivoted and changed the conversation to talk about violence, looting, and rioting. And I think that we constantly see those terms synonymous with race and systemic racism, and that in and of itself is racist. You cannot like tie those terms together. So I really was offended by that. That really stood out, and it really just shows that rather than believing and trusting in the people, in trusting in Black lives, and really kind of enforcing that Black Lives Matter and trying to dismantle this racist system that is in place. We have an administration that is just, you know, advocating for law enforcement and really not trying to provide any public oversight.
Right. Well, you know, one thing that did jump out to me is that, it's a big debate down there in Kentucky and Louisville about the grand jury and if all evidence was presented to the grand jury. Vice President Pence made a statement that the grand jury had been impaneled and had been presented all the evidence. And I think what we're finding right now is that the case for the actual murder of Breonna Taylor very well might not have been presented to the grand jury.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I found that case particularly interesting because I thought it was the job of the prosecution to go get the bad guy. Like, that's your job. Your job isn't to give the grand jury the information that you choose to give them and then back off and put your hands up and say, do what you do. The job is to present a case. And there was no case that was presented. And if one of those cops was killed, I guarantee you there would have been a case. It wouldn't have been, oh, cop died, here's information, grand jury, make your decision. No, there would have been action, and there would have been a lot more aggression in trying to seek out the case. I mean, we live in a country where people get convicted who are innocent. This is what happens. But yet, in a situation when it's a citizen being killed by cops, then it's just, oh, we're going to be all hands off. So I think that was a disingenuous thing to do. One thing that jumped out at me in this whole law and order conversation, though, was probably the one thing that Pence said that may have rang some truth, and that is when he looked at Senator Harris's record when she was working in law enforcement. And there are a lot of red flags with that, and I do think that it's fair to bring that up, especially when we hear communities and they keep saying, defund the police, take those funds, reallocate them into communities and let us keep ourselves safe. Both Biden and Harris, they're both on this reform kick, and neither one of them are on the defund kick. They think that more trainings can be the answer to police when we haven't really seen things actually work.
Right. Now, Pence, he went for Kamala Harris, though, on the issue here of, her record as a prosecutor. He said that when she was in San Francisco, Black people were 19 times higher. They were incarcerated at 19 times higher rate. 19 times higher rate. And that by the time she left as Attorney General of California, she had I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but incarcerated a higher rate of Black people in prison in California. And then he went on to say that the Trump administration has led the way on prison reform and everything else. But he went after her record as a prosecutor there in San Francisco. And that's kind of been, a soft spot for her, not only on the Republican side, but also in the Black community.
Absolutely. I mean, she's going to have to answer to that. And I think a lot of, look, the culture is going to come for you, especially when it comes down to law and order. I'm not a huge fan of prosecuting attorneys, not unless they are fair. And, the facts of the matter is that, Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, she has people still locked up in jail and, without repercussions. And so we need to figure out, we do need to fact check. We do need to check her record. But when it comes down to this big vote and we only have Joe Biden as the nominee and the ticket, we really don't have much of a choice. Right. But I think beforehand, I mean, Kamala Harris was not my choice for president because of her record.
Right. Mike, your thoughts?
I agree. I'm not the biggest fan of Senator Harris, to be honest. And it's a very conflicting thing. I mean, on one hand, like I said, my daughter sees her up there, and that's great. Like, I want my daughter to be able to have role models like that. But when you really parse through her record in law enforcement, there are so many things that jump out. The truancy things where the elementary school kids were truant. She made the punishments more hard on parents, and she literally sent poor people to jail on those issues. There are innocent people in jail. George Gage, you can Google that. He's in jail right now, and she had so many different opportunities to dismiss his case, and she chose to press forward. It's just really, really disturbing. And I don't have all those details in front of me, but like I said, you can Google that. It's there. But on the other hand, she was a pioneer with the body cams and making sure that law enforcement actually had to wear those body cams. She did introduce those implicit bias trainings, and we can debate the effectiveness of those trainings as much as we want, but the fact is, no one before her did that. She was the first to do so. So I do feel like in this election, our choices are pure evil and not so bad. And it sucks to be in this situation, but unfortunately, that's where we are.
Listen, my book says it's 6 on one side, half a dozen on the other. I think when it comes down to Senator Harris, if they win this ticket, if they do win the election, maybe she will, they say if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. So perhaps she will have learned from her mistakes. She will have learned from those transgressions. Maybe this was, kind of the necessary evil that she needed to be to become vice president and dismantle the system that we're all kind of seeking to do.
Right. And as much as I don't want to defend her, I will also jump in there and say that since she's left being an attorney and become a senator, a lot of her views have changed, and she actually has taken a step towards the left, towards being more progressive. So I will give her credit for that. But I don't think Biden or Harris are probably as progressive as the people in the communities are asking for.
I agree.
Now, speaking of that, though, taking a step away here from the debate, man, this election cycle, more than any, we see a lot of people saying, like, man, they're going to hold the vote hostage. They're going to, you know what I'm saying, that they're just not going to give the vote. It's a lot of people in the Black community that, like, one cycle ago or 2 cycles ago, you might have just considered that it was automatic. Oh, okay, this is Black woman, on the ticket. She got my vote. But it's like right now, it's a lot of celebrities that are out there. Like, nah, man, you're holding the vote hostage. I mean, what's your take on that? And, do you think that these people are going to last minute come around and hop on this, the Biden Harris ticket, or are they going for a write-in? Like, what's happening? Who's Diddy going to vote for?
That's a good question. I think that we have more people now kind of on the fence on who will be if they're undecided, then they're kind of still kind of caught in the middle. Hopefully this debate would have swayed those undecided voters to, one direction to the other. But I think it really comes down to the issues. If you're not a super left or a super right, I think it's going to come down to policies and issues that you believe in and who has more of those issues that you're going to ultimately write in. And hopefully, we just don't have those people who just don't go out and not vote, right? Because larger than just the presidential election, it's about voting for your local officials. It's about voting for your council members, your mayors, your commissioners, all those other people on the ballot as well. So even if you don't want to vote for someone for president, you don't even have to fill in that ticket. You don't have to put anybody, but fill out for your local representatives and vote for.
Well, let me ask you this, Mike. Is that Joe Biden came out with a lot of early criticism from the Black community, even before he selected Senator Harris, saying like, "What are you going to do?" You know what I'm saying? I mean, people felt like, oh, okay, well, you're running against Trump, so basically, you probably feel like you don't have to do nothing for the Black community. And a lot of people were saying that previous presidents, see, whether you like Trump or dislike Trump, or whether you liked Obama or disliked Obama, there's segments of American society that can say that the president changed their life for good. I mean, there's a lot of people, DACA, that changed a whole segment of people. Their life changed. You see what I'm saying? Under President Trump, a lot of these deregulations and opening up pipeline, that's changed whole people's lives in certain areas of the country. People wanted to know, it's like, yo, Joe Biden, what are you going to do to change Black people's lives? And he came out with Lift Every Voice with this plan there, which kind of, what do you think, Mike, as far as Biden's commitment and ability, if he's elected, to actually see some kind of measurable change for Black people in America?
I would say on the front end, I refuse to vote for Joe Biden, to be honest. I'm looking back at his infamous crime bill. And then as soon as he became the nominee, the first thing he did is start dancing around like he just automatically gets the black vote. I remember him even like jokingly saying, "Oh, if you don't vote for me, you're not black." And it's like, you don't just automatically get our vote. What are you going to actually do for our community? And to this day, there's not much concrete that I can say Joe Biden is going to do for us. Is he going to make our streets safer? I don't know. Will we have more jobs? Maybe. I mean, if you live in a disenfranchised community and you don't have access to proper education, and they propose this new green deal that's going to make all of these jobs in renewable energy, are you even going to have access to those jobs if you don't have that education? So there's still a lot of questions that are unanswered. But because of this pandemic that we faced, I think that Trump has been exposed to not at all be a politician. And I think at the end of the day, that's what's going to push a lot of people like myself who are on the fence or who wanted to refuse to vote for Biden towards the Biden-Harris ticket, because Trump isn't a politician. He's a businessman. And it's questionable how good he is at business at this point, because he did bungle the trade war with China. And we have seen how much he is in debt due to his taxes leaking. So at least I know that with Joe Biden, we'll have infrastructure. Trump just lets everything fall apart. So
yeah, but isn't that the thing that happens to black people every election? Yeah. We're like, well, if we vote for so and so, at least we know we won't get so and so. And so it's like there's never anything measurable that we're able to be like, yo, man, we started off better today than we was 4 years ago. What were you saying, Julia?
Listen, we need to have more people pushing, and I'm really actually disappointed that the question kind of came up, but it wasn't straightforward. What are you gonna do for Black people? What is the plan for Black people? I have watched multiple podcasts and different little episodes, but one that stands out, of course, and I can tell you guys are fans of the Breakfast Club, Charlemagne the God always asks every single presidential candidate, what's your plan for Black people, right? And so when he asked Joe Biden, what's your plan for Black people, he kind of gave this, old school answer. And I just think that's not what we're looking for. And to your point, Omari, is that something that we always do and just like, oh, I guess if I lean this way, it'll be a little bit better? Yeah. And I think, Mike, you brought up a great point. When you live in a disenfranchised community, when you are thinking about how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to feed my kids? How am I going to put gas in my car? You don't care about some of these issues. You don't care about who becomes president or not. You're thinking about how you're going to take care of your family. And so some of these like grander issues don't really stand out to you. So you're thinking about, who's going to be able to give us more jobs? How am I going to make this happen? Or you just feel like these issues are just too big and overwhelming that you just don't vote anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't really see like this incremental step for Black people coming out of this election.
I don't need it. I mean, Biden, like Julia said, where's the plan? What's the plan? What is the plan for the Black community? He doesn't have one. And it doesn't seem to me like he's even listening to what the Black community wants. He's standing so firm on this refusal to defund police. He's not listening to Black people. He's also said that he's not for healthcare for all. He's for a version of healthcare that may be better than Trump's. But as a Black man, I get tired of always having to vote for the lesser evil. Or I get tired of having to say, well, Biden is less racist than Trump. I hate having to operate in this space, but unfortunately in this two-party system, what are we going to do? President Trump endorsed the Proud Boys in the first debate. Like we can't vote for that, man. We just can't.
And President Pence had an opportunity to condemn white supremacy. And I was just wondering, why didn't Senator Harris make him condemn white supremacy right then and there? But here's the thing. Would that matter? Donald Trump cannot condemn white supremacy when that is his core supporters right now. He needs to win the election. If I'm his campaign manager, I'm going to say, stand back and stand by, okay? And double down on that too, because these are your supporters. This the same people who have cashed in for the police officer that had the knee on George Floyd's neck, who is now out of prison on bail. They paid for that. These white supremacist people who are under the veil of evangelists, they are paying for people. They are paying for their people, and they're galvanizing. So when it comes down to Black people and the Black vote, we are continuously taken advantage of. I'm with you guys on this. I don't want to give anybody my vote because it's the lesser evil, but I feel like I'm kind of forced to.
I mean, man, welcome to being a Black voter in America, man. I mean,
Can I say that real fast, Omari?
Yeah.
Pence said something interesting. So he blatantly said, "I trust the justice system." That is what he said when he was asked about Breonna Taylor and was justice served. But I think that another thing that kind of gets missed in this case is that if the AG in Kentucky have brought charges against the cops in the Breonna Taylor case, it would be more than likely that those cops, it would not have led to a conviction because that is the law in Kentucky. Once those officers fear for their lives, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
Once they fear for their lives, it gave them the right to do what they did. So my thing is, it's not like we need to change the laws. We need to change the law itself. We need no qualified immunity. It's not right that if a cop kills someone while they're on duty, you know, that's just the breaks. I feel like the police take this stance of they have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. So for us to do our jobs properly, people have to die. And I disagree with that. But if we're putting Biden and Harris in office, I don't think that these are issues that are going to be addressed. Police reform and increased training does not address the issue that it's damn near impossible to convict a cop on a murder charge. Like, those are laws. That's actual law that needs to be changed.
Right. Well, I'm sorry, just let me throw this in there real quick. But one thing that's interesting about the vice president's remarks is that around this case, the Breonna Taylor case, you talked about, it 100% believes law enforcement, trust the system and everything else. But also at the same administration, we hear them throw the FBI under the bus, and all these other, the law enforcement infrastructure at the highest level, the U.S. Attorney General under the bus, the FBI under the bus, and everything else. It just talked about Director Wray, some of the reports that he had are inaccurate. And so, it's kind of it's something that suits the scenario, I suppose. And what were you saying, Julia?
Well, good point. I mean, but we have also seen Senator Harris, come at like Attorney General Barr and tear him to the floor during some oversight hearings. So I think one thing we do got to remember is that Senator Harris, and I can speak a little bit more about her record, I think, than, Joe Biden. I think if anything, we're going to have an opportunity to change some laws, right? And she did mention tonight in the debate that if they, make it into the White House, that they are going to ban the chokeholds, right? And so, is that a step in the right direction? Absolutely. But really, we need more equity for Black people. And, we're in a moment in history right now where I think we're kind of at the boiling point. I don't know that we necessarily need our president or our vice president in order to change laws. What we really need to do is change the House and change the Senate. We really need to be able to have our votes there in order to really see legislation come into play and change, right? And so, unless we're going to have, the huge amount of executive orders that, stay or don't stay, we really need to push our local officials.
Right. And I mean, a lot of those things that they're talking about, that's fine. It can go on a federal level. But a lot of these things like, a carotid hold is, it's an illegal hold. I think even if you go to the SPD, Seattle Police Department, their guide, I spent this time over there with OPA, Office of Police Accountability. I mean, that's already a banned hold. And so it comes out and it's like a lot of these things are local level. But what gets me is I'm not hearing people, and maybe I haven't looked at enough speeches and things like that, but I'm not even hearing people say anything grand and amazing about or life changing for Black people and marginalized people, you know, in the country. For me, people who follow me on the morning update show and things like that, for me, it's the big three. In Seattle, the big three in Seattle is probably the big three across the country where Black people are at in marginalized communities. And one is the income gap. You know, income gap is massive here in Seattle. Average Black household makes $42,500 a year. Average white household, $105,000 a year. The second is home ownership. You know, home ownership for Black people is on a decline now. It was kind of rising up a little bit before COVID nationally. It's always been on the decline here lately in Seattle. But home ownership is what leads to generational wealth, and that stops Black people from pressing reset every generation. And the third thing is education. You know, again, right here in Seattle, the gap between Black and white students is one of the worst in America. And the three things that I think are sustainable changes for the better for Black people in America are the same things that any community would want. Any community wants great jobs, high-paying jobs. Any community wants home ownership and great schools. And, you know, I think that a lot of times the politicians want to talk in these broad sweeping terms. These are real, the fix might not be simple, but these are real simple issues to identify. Right. And I'm not understanding why people can't talk to them.
We didn't talk about any of those things tonight. I mean, for us to have such a huge crisis around education, and you know, I'm super big on education. We didn't talk about it at all. But I agree with you. Some of the top issues for Black people, you know, I agree. Definitely workforce and economic development. Where are the jobs coming from? And not just jobs, but really career-driven jobs, job placement where people can make not just an affordable wage, but be able to save money and take care of their families. Financial literacy doesn't exist in the Black community right now because we don't know how to save. We don't have enough money to save. And so when we get these checks and we're living paycheck to paycheck, you can't do anything with that. And so it doesn't allow you to do step 2 and 3, which is home ownership. I mean, you hear, and you know, this is a person that that people kind of shy away from, but Minister Louis Farrakhan, he always talks about having land, purchasing land, having property, and how valuable that is. And so many other of our Black leaders talk about that as well. Having that and being able to pass on and be able to generate wealth for the next generation behind you is critical and it's crucial. And if you think about it, I mean, when we talk about this gap for Black Americans, we're talking about over 400 years. Over 400 years where we have had to take a back seat, and there's no way we're ever going to catch up. So when people talk about reparations, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about giving us an edge up to be able to catch up, to be able to do those things. We need real career-driven jobs. We need to be able to purchase homes that are not in gentrified neighborhoods. I mean, right now, as a family of 4, it's almost impossible for me to buy a property here in the city. And I work in the nation's capital. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, to see a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house for almost $500,000, it's insane.
Yeah, well, welcome to the Terror Dome.
The same way. It's literally all over the country. Unless you want to live in the boonies where you're not going to make, where that income gap is not there. I mean, how are you going to do it?
Right. What are your thoughts, Mike, as far as like this addressing these basic things? These are the things any community in America wants: higher paying jobs. They want home ownership, which leads to generational wealth, and they want better schools.
I would say, I think you hit the nail on the head. The big three was not addressed in this. Nothing that was really specific to the Black community was addressed. And I know for me personally, for a long time, that's what turned me off of politics as a whole. I always felt like it was really just a bunch of white people debating with other white people about issues that will help the lives of white people, and that Black people really just took a back burner. The Democrats want the Black vote, but they never take a hard stance on Black issues. And going back to Senator Harris, she's against reparations. Like she said, reparations specifically for the Black community is something that she is against. So how can you expect to have the Black vote when you're against reparations? Hopping off an airplane in a pair of Timbs is not what's going to get you the black vote. A bunch of politicians throwing up a fist and taking a knee with kente cloths on, that's not how you get the vote. If you really want to get our vote and you really want to get our support, how about bringing up some of the issues that actually pertain to us in our communities and actually listening to our voices? Because that's what the job of the politician is. You're supposed to represent the communities. And right now, I don't feel like we have politicians on a national level that's doing that, not in this presidential debate.
Right, right. Well, before we get out of here, it's funny, we got another debate here going on in our state of Washington, and that's Governor Inslee and his challenger Cope. And I'll be honest with you, Cope's out there, but I mean, Inslee for the most part, he's you tell me, you're the reporter, Mike. What's Inslee looking like out there right now? His lead is big, at least in the polls.
It's going to stay big. It's going to stay big. Cope right now is out here talking about reopening schools and trying to reopen things for the economy. And the way the virus has ravaged our communities, that's not the way to go. We need safety. We don't need another politician that cares more about putting dollars into the economy as opposed to the health and well-being of citizens. I think that the way that Inslee has stepped up and had to fight tooth and nail with Trump for months.
Yeah. Now, but Bob's 34-1. That's our attorney general against the Trump administration. He's taken him to court 34 times, so he's 34-1. And so, Governor Inslee doesn't have a problem taking on President Trump.
Well, listen, you see the mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser. She's been coming at President Trump. So I respect her leadership in that. And I think anybody who can go toe to toe with the president should be commended.
All right. So look, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Real fast, though. Just look, I know that a lot of people might be on the fence still, but one thing that I do think that is very important to point out, especially for people here in Washington, is the Trump administration is trying their absolute hardest right now to not provide any federal funding to us. Our city government has already taken a really big budget hit. You can see how the mayor, who is in hot water right now, by the way, but the way that he's already done some posturing to try to show that, those federal dollars, she's projecting to be able to use those in the future. If Trump wins, that's not going to be a possibility. And our current climate will probably get a lot worse with the Trump win.
All right.
I have one last question. It's a quick one. Who do you guys think won the debate tonight?
Oh, Harris. Harris by a landslide. Pence, there was like two questions that Pence answered directly. One of them was from the child, and the other one was when he got to attack her record as a prosecutor. The rest of the time, he was talking in circles.
He just didn't answer anything. And I thought it was very telling that he asked his own questions and then took the longest time to not answer them. I've never seen that happen before.
Yeah, I'm disappointed in all this debate stuff. I'll be honest with you. I keep what. Yeah, I mean, this is a public service, so it's like we carry this. We come and talk about this for public service, man. But like, and I host a lot of forums. I host a lot of whatever. I'm around a lot of politicians, community organizers, and everything. And I'm just, I'm over it. I mean, mostly because at the end of the day, no one is really able to just say yes or no on something, like yeah or no. It's just these long stories and parables and everything else. But who do you think won, Julia?
Well, I think, off first glance, I definitely think Senator Harris took on Pence, because I just think Vice President Pence didn't answer anything, right? And then he was very rude. He didn't follow the rules. He didn't answer any questions. And he asked his own questions, and that wasn't the thing. I do think that Senator Harris didn't answer a few questions as well that I wanted to hear from. I did want to hear her stance on China, and she didn't answer that, and she also didn't address access to affordable healthcare and what the plan was to be able to do that. She mentioned that it would happen, but she didn't say how. And so I think there's still a lot of things left on the table.
we're gonna get out of here so we can watch these other people debate. This is for the governor, so we're gonna check that out. Before we get out of here, though, Julia, Jessie, how can people keep up with you?
Please go follow me on Instagram at Treasure of Jewels. That'll probably be the best way to follow me. And yeah, that's it.
That's it, Mike.
You can find me on Twitter at Real M Davis. Also, South Seattle Emerald. We're everywhere. Just Google us.
We everywhere. South Seattle Emerald. I like that. All right. Thank you very much, Julia. Thank you very much, Mike. And as we get closer here to Election Day, I'm sure that we'll be talking soon. Programming note for everybody out there. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. is the morning update show. And then tomorrow at 6 p.m. is the gun violence roundtable. We got Seattle Police Chief Adrian Diaz and a lot of different people from the community, and also a lot of victims' families and victims advocates. So that's from 6 to 9 right here where you're watching this show. Julia, Mike, we'll catch you guys later.
See you later. Night, guys.